Our self-extinction is here. Hi, I'm Geronimo Vela, and I'm here to bring the importance and awareness of our message from Earth Mother. We are in dire need of a change. And there's 3 words, RDR, respect, discipline, and responsibility. We all have to make that change. And how do we make that change? This film will tell you how. Traditional, indigenous ways of being. That is our solution to save our future and our planet. So all of us here making this film are talking through our Earth Mother to send you this message. So please listen and awaken. In today's fast-paced and oftentimes chaotic world, we are well aware that things are not as we would like for them to be. Try as we may to find peace and calm in our lives, if our daily routine involves being with and around other people, we may seldom be truly at peace there. Perhaps because of the sounds and interferences of too many activities or technological toys we have allowed to intrude in our lives. So why is traditional indigenous ways of being so important? Because contrasted with the non-indigenous ways of doing, where they are not thinking of others most of the time, but rather what they can achieve for themselves. By way of ownership and wealth, the traditional indigenous ways of being is a way of living and putting the interests and needs of others before our individual self. And the reason I bring this up is because this film is about traditional indigenous ways of being. And yes, due to colonization, the majority of us have all changed our lives. We've all become part of that American system, the capitalism, the materialism. A lot of the Native Americans have also lost that traditional indigenous ways of being. But there's a balance and a harmony there where we can still be a part of that world and still stay true to our tradition and our culture. So that's why I bring this up, because this film is about traditional indigenous ways of being and the focus that we can have the balance and harmony of both those worlds. And that's what everybody needs. Yes, you can have technology, but it has to be used in a balanced way. Hence this film, Traditional Indigenous Ways of Being, because our traditional indigenous ancestors had the answer. Due to colonization, it was lost. We need to get back there. All of us involved in this film have been directed and guided by Great Spirit by way of dreams, insights, lessons from our Earth Mother, and the animal nations to bring these messages to the world from our traditional indigenous ancestors, whereby we may all have an example of how to love and live in harmony and balance with our sacred Earth Mother and with all of creation. Let us awaken also to what the humans are doing to our environment. And that's where RDR, respect, discipline, and responsibility are coming into play. And this is why we need to also get back to traditional indigenous ways of being. The humans are destroying our environment. And that's causing our wildlife, our natures, to change, but change in a negative way to the humans. Like take, for example, here in Japan, because of the whole nuclear thing and fallout and everything, there are now wasps the size of my hand that because they mutated to survive in that environment, now it's radioactive. That's just an example of what the humans are doing to our environment. So there's no respect, there's no discipline, and there's no responsibility for our actions. So the humans just do whatever they think they want to do. And why? Because of technology. Now, I'm not saying technology is a bad thing. It's only bad when it's used in a negative way. Humans seem to, throughout history, they take one thing and they take it to the extreme, and then it usually ends up being negative. So now, technology is not being used to enhance your life and to make things better so you can better support our growing population, which is growing at a phenomenal rate, faster than our resources can keep up. Instead of using technology for good, it's being abused now. You have people walking along with their face in the phones, falling into holes, falling into other people. People don't even acknowledge the person they're walking next to. That's an abuse of technology. People have lost their way. Hence, traditional indigenous ways of being. If you're focused on others in your community, you would never look down. You would never always be looking at yourself in the mirror. You'd be looking at others. Respect, responsibility, and discipline. It's RDR. You must respect what you are looking at, what you're dealing with. And the discipline is you have to be focused. You have to make the effort to go and make that change. And we all have a responsibility. All that technology, you have to be responsible for technology because of what it's doing to humans. If you continually abuse our environment, you're going to destroy our future. Traditional, indigenous ways of being. That's where we need to get back to. So let's all make that change and get back there. We all need to make it happen. RDR. Respect, discipline, and responsibility are three words that are seldom applied in today's society. And that leads us to a major and life-threatening issue which we can no longer ignore: climate change. Whether we choose to acknowledge it or not, mankind's actions have led to devastating effects on our planet, economy, lives, and environment. Arctic ice caps and glaciers worldwide are melting at an unprecedented fast rate, causing sea levels to rise, and with oceans warming, extreme and unparalleled and hostile weather events are taking place globally. The majority of world scientists agree that human actions are responsible.
I walk a path of beauty, walk a path my ancestors laid out before me. I walk a path of beauty, walk a path my ancestors laid out before me. I make a path of beauty, hold my vision, roll my dreaming up before me.
World Economic Forum says this: scientists say humans have wiped out 60% of wildlife in less than 50 years. A fifth of the Amazon has disappeared, and we've lost half of all the world's shallow water corals. Pollution, climate change, and habitat loss are the major factors. Scientists tracked 4,000 species between 1970 and 2014 and found 89% of vertebrate animals in South and Central America have been wiped out, mostly by deforestation to clear land for planting crops such as soy. Many scientists think humans have already triggered a sixth mass extinction, and we have already destroyed 83% of all mammals that have ever existed. Even if we stop poaching, polluting, and destroying wildlife areas in the next 50 years, it would take 3 to 5 million years for Earth to return to how it is today. How can we protect wildlife from extinction? Perhaps part of the answer can begin with RDR. Respect, discipline, responsibility. Showing more respect for all living things, applying more discipline in our lives, and taking responsibility for all of our negative actions. I would like to awaken you all to another issue. And this is the issue of we are still here. The Native American people, we're not invisible. We've come invisible to the general public, to you all. But we're all around you. Why is it that you drive by us and you don't even see us? We're here. An example of this is that Native Americans are not included in any diversity, or in take this instant for Hollywood, in diversity casting. We have everybody. We have the African Americans, the Asian, the Hispanics, and the Eastern Indian. We have the Middle East, but yet we don't include Native Americans. Why is that? Why have we become the forgotten people? We are still here. And while we're at it, let's dispel a couple of myths here. The scalping. Native Americans have been associated with the scalping, but this is a historical fact. The Native Americans were scalped because the United States government paid bounty hunters, whoever it was, non-indigenous, to bring in and kill all the Native Americans and take their scalps, man, woman, and child, so that way they could commit genocide of the Native American people. It even cost them, take for instance, $5 a head. Now that ended up being bad, and they had to do away with it because the non-indigenous started killing anybody that had black hair. So then that eventually was stopped. So, and another myth is that we don't all, everybody says, oh, Native Americans, oh, you got your education paid for. No, we don't. The majority of Native American tribes on their reservations are poor. We don't have all that money. Some of them have been successful, but it's less than 1%. And they did it business-wise, doing the American way, capitalism. That's how they made their money. With all of the dire statistics of how we humans have been destroying this planet and all other living things, we in this film believe that the traditional indigenous ways of being offer all of us the greatest example and guideline as to how we can do our part in stopping, or at least slowing down, this mass extinction of our own species. It has been traditional indigenous unbroken connection with the spirit world that has allowed them to survive as a people. To offer a stark difference, in Christian religion, both man and creation are doomed from the beginning of creation. But in the traditional tribal religion, man and the rest of creation are respectful and cooperative of the tasks set before them by Great Spirit. By that, we mean man and creation are doomed from the beginning of a creation in the Christian religion is the fact that when you're born to die. And then your goal is to get into heaven and your life is over. But in the traditional tribal religion, we believe that we are spirit. And when we're born, we're there to live as a spirit. And when this physical body dies, our spirit lives on. A negative aspect of Christian doctrine is man receiving domination over the rest of creation. This has led to man's economic exploitation of the earth, with all its negative effects, leading to our present ecological crisis.
In the stillness of morning, when all creation still slumbers.
Hungamaheji, Washu Demomo Kletle Kashinati, Digam Dia, Dr. Lisa Grayshield. Well, the biggest attribute is that I'm continuously connected to nature. From the indigenous perspective, nature is the mind of God. So when, and our Western scientific research now proves this. So it took them a little while to catch up with indigenous ways of knowing, but now we know that when you walk barefoot on the earth, you get in touch with an electrical charge that runs through your body that allows you to be grounded. So walking barefoot on the earth is an important thing to do to understand that connection.
Most of us, as children, have been conditioned by adults to fear, but the spiritual path does not accept or include fear, for it recognizes that fear is a defect in our character rather than a reality. When on the spiritual path, we may learn that our greatest teachers are love and pain, and perhaps some of our best education on this path can take place outdoors where the animals can teach us, if we learn to observe and respect them. This lesson in nature can greatly help us in knowing our Creator better. Perhaps the greatest glimmer of hope for our planet lies in the rising action with many of our youth today. Presently, across the planet, young people are taking a stand, like never before in world history, and exposing the horrific damage that our world leaders have allowed to happen by not boldly addressing climate change in a positive and aggressive manner. At the present, the youth across the planet are in the majority at addressing the immediate need for all of us to do our part in affecting positive change with climate change. The youth understand that if immediate, positive action is not taken on this issue, then they will not have a planet left worth living on. The world stage is now set, and if we are bold enough to take action to create a better world for us all, then support and get behind the youth's movement to tackle climate change, and by incorporating that with the traditional indigenous ways of being, there can be a better and brighter future for us all.
Understand that we have an impact on the world, that the choices we make on a daily basis about how we live our lives impacts the world in either a way that is stressing it out or helping it out. And so I think it's important that we recognize all the things like recycle, reuse, reduce, really try to reduce our footprint, from a physical aspect, but from an emotional aspect, getting to know ourselves.
Earth Mother is sacred, and through her and great spirit of creation, we can find the wisdom and divine power in each of us and the wisdom of the indigenous elders, and thereby discover that our souls are very old.
Hello, my name is Leanne Anthony Tortolita. I'm Dinesh from the Navajo Reservation. We're here today with my family and want to educate them a little bit more about the ancestors and the spirits that are here. I find it hard to believe that our ancestors had lived in this area with very little, but living off the land closer to Mother Earth and all the things that go on around it outside of this. I feel like Mother Earth is being abused for so long. If we don't continue to educate our children, educate ourselves as well, and stay connected to what was given to us, it helps us stay spiritually grounded when we stay close to these ways. Practicing what we believe, using our medicine is what keeps us strong and keeps us going. And a lot of people don't understand that. And a lot of people kind of take life for granted. For us as Native American, being my husband from Santo Domingo Pueblo, my children are Dene as well. My daughter here is from the Ojibwe Nation. And my youngest here is also Santo Domingo Pueblo. So regardless of what tribe we're from, we all stay connected through prayer, through the four sacred mountains, through our corn pollen, our sage. Whatever medicine we decide to use, I feel like it helps us to stay on the path outside of these traditional ways. Living in the city is sometimes hard and hectic. Living in the modern world is sometimes chaotic. You kind of get into the technology use. You get too much involved in the social networking. For us, we really try to just keep everything basic so that we can live life comfortably without having too many distractions to push us into opposite directions. So being here today and visiting places like this, like Mesa Verde and Bandelier, it really help you get connected with what's going on around you. You don't realize how strong these spirits are until you're actually there. Being able to pray and feeling so privileged to be who we are, it's important to know that.
The traditional indigenous recognized and respected the spirit in all things, not just in humans. A good example, corn was more than nourishment to them, for they sensed divine forces at work in the yearly transformation from seed to heavy-laden stalks.
Plant medicines are strong, and I would encourage anybody to follow a thread if they get a notion in their head to see if some plants can help them out, anywhere from drinking simple mineralizing teas to engaging in some ceremonies should you get the opportunity to drink ayahuasca, or maybe you get invited to a Native American church ceremony and you get to partake of the Holy Sacrament peyote. And so, those kinds of things are done very legally and really important in our ability to interconnect. So I encourage everybody to get engaged in ceremony.
The plant nations were a chief ally in the traditional indigenous fight against illness and injury. For poisonous snake and insect bites, most potent were herbs from the chicory family. For rashes and inflammation, dressings were made from dogwood, poplar, or sassafras bark. Ground up bark from the wild cherry tree was used to make cough syrup. Oak bark was used for washing out wounds. The willow tree bark, leaves, and roots were prepared in compounds to treat aches and pain. In the southeast, ginseng root was valued for its curative powers. With tobacco, what the invading early Europeans saw as something to sell and make a profit, the traditional indigenous saw as a sacred plant, and it was used in spiritual ceremonies and as a tool for making peace with one another. With many traditional indigenous people, grandparents taught the children the value of generosity and sharing. Hoarding was deplored, and status was measured by how much a man gave away, rather than how much he could accumulate.
So that was, and so the paradigm of the Western world functioning in that brought a kind of an innate sort of stress, because innately I knew that the competitiveness of trying to strive for materialism was not going to bring balance and harmony into the world. And I innately understood that we're all in this together, digum hiki anga hulao, and that our standards-based curriculum in our schools at all levels, from preschool to university, college, all of those programs are assisting us with moving in that Western paradigm and away from our innermost knowing of ourselves. Instead we're striving for something that is a model or an example out there. We have a lot of young people who are really absorbed in the technology and really absorbed in what's going on in social media. And so they're being informed by each other, and that constant bombardment in their brain is causing some problems. And I won't go into all the research about that, but it brings us away from our ability to sit quietly with ourselves and feel our highest expression and be our highest expression so that we can contribute in a positive way to our world.
Acquiring individual wealth was never a pursuit of the indigenous. They lived for the betterment of community in mind. If a woman's husband died or was killed in battle, the tribe took care of her and her children. Wealth accumulation was not in their lexicon, but sharing of all that they had was. They never took more from nature than what they needed for survival. Before killing an animal for food, they offered up a prayer to it for giving its life, so that they might live. Up and down the plains the white man ranged, shooting sometimes as many as 100 bison a day. Behind them came the skinners with their wagons. They piled the hides and bones into the wagons until they were full, and then they took their loads to the new railroad stations that were being built to be shipped back east to an eager market. Old Lady Horse, a Kiowa woman, said, "Most of the meat was left to rot. A white officer told the buffalo hunters to kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone." The mighty bison was the mainstay of the plains natives, numbering over 60 million before contact with the whites. The bison was used for food, teepees, clothing, tools, and almost everything that was needed for their survival. And then the whites came.
My brother, I do not understand. You promised peace and gave your hand. You took the grass and gave me sand. Why, my brother? Because our worship was not the same, and I called our God by a different name. My religion you have called profane. Why, my brother? Sickness you brought from foreign shores, and laid them kindly at my door. My sons and daughters are no more. Why, my brother? The buffalo that roam our land, once as numerous as grains of sand, I now can number on one hand. Why, my brother? My bones now feel the winter's chill as I'm gazing down from atop the hill. Tell me if you will, why, my brother?
The traditional indigenous never sought to subdue the land. Instead, they conformed their pursuits to the requirements of nature in ways that are different from those who claim title to the land today could learn quite a lot. By recognizing and honoring the spirit of animals, our species could learn a great deal about the importance of living in harmony and balance with all animate and inanimate things.
Yeah, well, first of all, what is a traditional way of being for you? Because my medicine might not be your medicine. The way I do ceremony might not be the way you do ceremony. I think it's just important that we recognize that when we do begin to see ourselves as vibratory beings that have an impact on the world, that we understand that we came here to bring a positive impact. And so I think it's absolutely critical for us to step into our highest expression. If you like to play music, really do well at it. Don't be lazy about it.
A striking difference in the traditional indigenous ways of being versus the white invaders, the traditional indigenous, by recognizing spirit in all living things, instilled in them honor and respect for all things. By the non-indigenous religion giving man dominion over everything, this has led to our revolving situation of greed, power, huge egos, and self-centeredness, instead of the traditional indigenous way of making community welfare first. We are aware that due to colonization, the modern Native American today has all the negative traits as everyone else does. Here's an example of traditional indigenous ways of being. The traditional ancestors were all practicing equality. There was no classism where basically those who had more money were better than the ones who had less money and poor. They didn't treat them any differently, like they were better or worse. Everybody was equal. It was gender, men, women, everybody was equal. Versus now, In the non-indigenous way of being and doing is we have classism, we have genderism, discrimination and prejudice and judgment based on whether you're a man or a woman. So, and also we have ageism. The traditional indigenous respected their elders, and the elders respected the youth, the children. And nowadays, in modern times, we don't have that. We have ageism, which is discrimination based on your age. You don't respect your elders, and then that's why respect, discipline, and responsibility, which is the basic foundation of traditional indigenous ways of being. Because we have racism, obviously everybody knows what that is, classism, ageism, and genderism. All that discrimination, prejudice, and judgment against somebody just based on those assumptions that we make ahead of time when we first see them. But traditional indigenous did not do that. The way they were of being was that everybody was equal. We could learn something from everybody. Everybody had their strengths. Everybody brought something to the table. We all have our own wisdom. We have our own life experiences, and all that matters. So let's practice traditional indigenous ways of being for the future. What the first Europeans consistently found among the indigenous was them performing various ceremonies of thanks, respect, and honor of Great Spirit and Earth Mother's gifts. Paramount in traditional indigenous ways of being was storytelling and keeping an oral history. A Pueblo elder said, "We have lived upon this land from days beyond history's records, far past any living memory, deep into the time of legend. The story of my people and the story of this place are our single story. We are always joined together."
You know, I don't think everybody still believes that we're living in teepees and those kinds of things. You know, there are certainly native people represent a people that were living indigenously not so long ago. So the difference between a Native American indigenous person is that we're not so far removed from the knowingness of connection and interconnection. And I would say that the majority of tribes, very general and pan-Indian, believe that we are, that everything is alive, from the rocks to the water, to the sky, to the trees, to the animals, that we're all living beings and we're all a part of the same structure. And we have stories that tell us how to respect those things and how to walk in a way that brings balance and harmony, as opposed to what happened with colonization. You know, when we had a paradigm that came in and decided that conquer and divide and using the earth as resources and animals and even humans as slavery and all those kinds of things, that the masses were to benefit those few. So a paradigm was imposed that didn't make sense.
A Zuni saying, "The landscape is our church, a cathedral. It is like a sacred building to us." Great Apache leader Geronimo said, "We had no churches, no religious organizations, no Sabbath day, no holidays, and yet we worshiped. Sometimes the whole tribe would assemble to sing or pray, sometimes in a small number. Sometimes we prayed in silence. Sometimes each one prayed aloud. A prayer of thanksgiving should always precede a prayer of asking for something." The phrase, "all my relatives," is frequently invoked by Indians performing ceremonies, inviting all other life forms to participate, as well as to inform them that the ceremony is being done on their behalf.
The earth is our mother. The earth is alive. That the elements, every one of the elements, carry a vibration. And it's important for us to go back to that understanding. We do that in all of our ceremonies. The earth, water, fire, and air. Ethers. All of those things. You know, we come back to the very basic understanding of life. So then we step out of those ceremonies and we create in a way that's respectful.
Since you are here as strangers, you should rather confine yourselves to the customs of our country than to impose yours upon us. Mukamesi leader, 1633. let's awaken to another issue that should concern everybody. And that's what anthropologists like to call ethnocentrism, which is that one culture thinks that their culture is better than every other culture around the world. They think they are superior to another culture. Well, that's what happened when the non-indigenous came over here, and then the Native Americans were stuck having contact with them. They thought their culture and around the world was better than our culture, and then they went and committed genocide on us. And let's give you a historic fact and a population on that. The genocide, when they first came over in contact, our population of the Native Americans was over 5 million. And then over the years, in the next 10 or 20 years, it went down to 250,000. That is almost 5 million people killed, which is worse than even the Holocaust and any other type of genocide that's taken throughout the world's history. I bet nobody knew about that fact. Well, why don't people understand their history and learn that? The traditional indigenous ways of being, when we lived, we accepted all those non-indigenous. We helped them. We taught them how to survive on this land. We accepted them in. So why can't every other culture do that? Now, let's take it back to what's going on today. We've lost traditional indigenous ways of being in the fact that throughout history, we've had pre-contact and contact. The non-indigenous came over here, and what did they do? They took everything they wanted. They didn't accept our culture. They took over our culture, the Native American culture, and changed us to be the way they wanted us to be. Well, let's look what's going on in today's history, in the culture right now. What's happening to the United States of America? We have all these people, non-U.S. Americans, coming into our country now, the United States, and they refuse to change. They come over here and now they are trying to change all of us here. Do you see a pattern of what's going on here? And why are now all of these what considered Native Americans, because we're indigenous Americans, you're all Native Americans, why are you all blind to what's going on? You need to become awakened to the fact of what is going on here. And again, that word is ethnocentrism. Look it up. Anthropologists around the world know that word very well. And I've learned it because I'm getting my PhD in anthropology, cultural and archaeology anthropology. But I'm here speaking to you in the balance of worlds as an Apache, the great nephew of Geronimo, and an anthropologist. Geronimo, the great Apache leader, said, "When Ustan created the Apaches, he also gave them their homes in the West. He gave them such grain, fruits, and gave as they needed to eat. And all they needed for clothing and shelter was at hand. Thus it was in the beginning. The Apaches in their homes, each created for the other. When they are taken from these homes, they sicken and die.
Water is important to our future generations, and we're all going to stand up. And so as an indigenous person, we can't not recognize the destruction to Mother Earth. So part of being a healthy, well-adjusted, and well-rounded indigenous person is recognizing the destruction that's happening around our world and doing what we can locally, in our families, leading campaigns for recycling, maybe stop, using your own containers, becoming ultimately responsible so that we're not creating a lot of junk in the world. And, there are things that we can do. We don't have to use plastic water bottles. We know we have a plastic island. So the awareness of environmental destruction and the fact that we're standing up for clean water, clean air, and those kinds of things around the world shows that we have some very healthy people out there. And so that is absolutely incredible.
The vegetation, water, snow, air, animals, all provided for us by Earth Mother. We must stop and fully observe her to understand and appreciate her. All that she does has purpose, harmony, and balance. We need to ask ourselves why we are choosing to pollute, contaminate, and destroy her.
And I'm breathing anticipation. The rising sun warms my soul.
Our excessive use of fossil fuels pollutes it all. Earth Mother's animals can teach all of us the best way to live in harmony and balance. But we must first observe, then apply. Make no mistake, Earth Mother is the ruler of us all. Not kings, queens, or presidents. The animal kingdom is wise to run away when they hear, smell, or see us. Yet the animals can be our greatest teachers in how to live in harmony and balance with all living things. But who is listening or paying attention to them? The most common shape in the universe is the circle, and all good and true things take place within the circle, not with straight lines and squares. Straight lines take you away from a beginning, but when we travel within the circle, we stay connected and realize that we are all interconnected and a part of the one. Being native is not just DNA. It is about the way you are living and being and your cultural life. It's true that silence is golden at times, so be silent. Listen to the environment and nature speaking. All of the signs are given to us if we will merely listen and observe. We must remember that knowledge without action is ineffective. It is true that today many indigenous are as guilty as non-indigenous in not respecting and honoring our sacred Earth Mother and all living things. We are all in this together, and the responsibility lies with all of us to get our act together and beginning applying the traditional indigenous ways of being if we want to continue surviving on the bosom of our mother. Today in the United States, we are often reminded of the atrocities that were committed by Germany's Holocaust, but seldom, if ever, do we hear of the Holocaust that the white European immigrants committed against the indigenous people of the Americas. As a nation, we have been good at pointing the finger where other people and nations have gone wrong. But how often do we take time to look at ourselves and realize that we are far from being innocent? As the old saying goes, what goes around comes around. Well, now we are paying an extremely high price for our disrespectful ways, selfishness, greed, arrogance, egotism, and gluttony. Our children are killing other children. Runaway suicides, opioid epidemic, drugs and other addictions of many sorts, and perhaps one of our worst addictions, the addiction to technology, letting it control our lives instead of us controlling it. This is why we need to make a change and awaken and get back to traditional indigenous ways of being. And it's because of ethnocentrism is a big factor in this, because that causes one culture to be superior, feel like they're superior of another, which leads to genocide of people. Genocide is not a good thing. Our people, and not just Native Americans, but everybody around the world, they have gone through some form of genocide in their history. Please awaken to this. We need to change. This is something that is important. for the future of this world and everyone. So please, let's get back to watch this film and learn what traditional indigenous ways of being is. It's about thinking about others, your community, everyone around the world. It's not just about ourselves. We have to think of it. If you think of others, it comes back on yourself. We can survive as a people, but no more genocide. Let us get back to traditional indigenous ways of being. The best medicine any of us can ever use is preventive medicine. The plant nations can be our greatest ally in this endeavor. The traditional indigenous people, without hospitals and pharmaceutical drugs, respected and honored the plant nations for keeping them healthy, active, and alive.
So, again, I just can't stress the importance. It's not so that everybody can be the same. Everybody can have the same religion. We can all gather and sing the same songs. We're all going to be different. That's the beauty of it. We're situated in different places. Some of us are going to be called to drop everything and move into nature because we really need that healing. Others, that reconnection is there. Maybe it's come through the different lineages in your DNA. We all have beauty in us that comes from our mom and our dad, and we're the compilation of that. And so we want to move that forward into the future for our future generations, So step into your highest vibration.
Our best education takes place outdoors where the animals can teach us. If we want to know Creator better, observe the animals in their natural environment. Humans fear the unknown, but that's where we learn. To better learn, always observe from higher places and perspectives. Arriving Europeans have been slow to understand that their history is brief compared to the indigenous of the Americas that go back far beyond the founding of the earliest civilizations of the Old World. Brought in by the first Europeans, smallpox typically killed 50 to 90% of the natives that came in contact with it. In 2 months, a population of 1,600 Mandans fell to 125. In 1848, nearly 2,500 Mormons in 800 wagons arrived in Utah, bringing the smallpox and cholera with them. Great Seneca leader Sagayawatha Red Jacket said, "Your forefathers crossed the great water and landed on this island, Turtle Island. Their numbers were small. We took pity on them, and they sat down among us. We gave them corn and meat. They gave us poison in return." Red Cloud, an Oglala Lakota leader, said, "They made us many promises, more than I can remember. They never kept but one. They promised to take our land, and they took it." The 1830 Indian Removal Act allowed President Jackson to take the 5 civilized tribes, Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole, land in the southeast and move the natives to Oklahoma, which led to the now famous Trail of Tears. In 1811, speaking to the southern Choctaw and Chickasaw tribes in Mississippi, Shawnee leader Tecumseh said, "Sell the country? Why not sell the air, the great sea, as well as the earth? Did not the Great Spirit make them all for the use of his children? Soon your mighty forest trees will be cut down to fence the land. Soon their broad roads will pass over the graves of your fathers. You too will be driven from your native land as leaves are driven before the winter storms." Because of the non-indigenous invaders, old languages of the indigenous would be silenced, sacred ceremonies abandoned, people scattered, and ancient skills of survival would disappear. Abe Conklin, a Ponca Osage, said, "A lot of our tribes don't know their own traditions, teachings, or ways. And that's a shame, because someday your children and grandchildren will ask what their purpose is on Grandmother Earth.
I am the mountain within the mountain. I am the mountain within the mountain. I am immovable. I am peaceful.
For the Dene, Navajo people, the universe resided in perfect balance, controlled by a type of spiritual symmetry, 4 seasons, 4 directions, 4 winds, and 4 basic colors. Most importantly, an essential harmony prevailed, which blended the concepts of beauty, peace, happiness, and righteousness.
The biggest contrast and difference from an indigenous thought process, which is based on sustainability for our future generations, the recognition of the world in all directions, the north, the south, the east, the west, above, below, and all around. And elementals that are connected to all those directions as symbolisms to assist us in understanding that we're a part of all of creation. We're a part of the vibration that moves in every construct. And so in order for us to sustain a positive way to live for our future generations, we seek to have a positive impact on the world. So all the things about recycle, reusing, reducing, those are important things. Understanding that our water sources need to be clean for our future generations. Important stands to take.
Lone Wolf, a Blackfoot boy, in reference to the Carlisle Indian boarding school in Pennsylvania, said, "Once there, our belongings were taken from us. Even our little medicine bags our mothers had given us to protect us from harm. Everything was placed in a heap and set afire. Next was the long hair, the pride of all the Indians. The boys, one by one, would break down and cry when they saw their braids thrown on the floor." In 1609, while Runzacock, Powhatan said, "Why should you take by force that from us which you can have by love? Why should you destroy us who have provided you with food? What can you get by war?" Today, the corporate world continues to force tribal people off their remaining small amount of land across the planet, and especially in the US, Canada, and Latin America, thereby destroying the only group of people that may have the answers to their means of survival on this planet. Non-indigenous writers have consistently written the wrong history of indigenous to justify the abuses and taking of their land.
Hello, my name is Louis Yellowman from Canyon de Chelly. Okay, to my right here, this is Canyon del Muerto, also known as Canyon of the Dead. The heart of the Navajo land is right here. This is Navajo Fortress. This is where the long walk really started by Kit Carson back in 1863. This is where they started separating, where they killed Navajos, our family. The homeland is here. We got cornfields, orchard trees down in there, livestock down in there. We still own this land. And then this is most of our trail, but most of the trail is being built by the government, which my people didn't agree with it, but the government is taking over. Everything is owned by the government now. To my left, this is still part of the canyon. The canyon separates 5 ways. The most canyon they share is Canyon de Chelly, Monument Canyon, Black Rock Canyon, Canyon del Muerto, Canyon of the Dead. Kit Carson, he the one that came around, took my people to Bosque Pantando. Huelte, Huelte. That's why we call it the Long Walk. Huelte. It started from here, Navajo Fortress. Behind me, Navajo Fortress. There's a lot of stories, a lot of crying about this area. But most of the story was never been written. It's in our heart. It's in our people's mind. The story that you read about the Nebraska Bantando Kit Carson, totally nothing. A lie, a lie, a lie. That's the white man's work, white man's work. Us Navajo, we're talking about ourselves, our own story. It was sad, sad, long walk.
I am immovable. I am peaceful. La da da la la
John Trudell, Santee, Dakota, political activist, said, "We must go beyond the arrogance of human rights. We must go beyond the ignorance of civil rights. We must step into the reality of natural rights, because all of the natural world has a right to exist, and we are only a small part of it. There can be no trade-off." A few words of wisdom from Luther Standing Bear, Lakota. A good leader must be a giver and not a receiver, a man of self-denial. Following this train of thought, a list of some of our North American indigenous leaders that set a good example that could be beneficial for all of us to follow are the Apaches, Geronimo; Cochise, Victorio, Lozin, Mangus Coloradus; and from the Lakota Nation, Sitting Bull, Black Elk, Crazy Horse, and Red Cloud. From the Crow Nation, Plenty Coup, Chief Joseph from the Nez Perce Nation, Tecumseh, the Great Shawnee Leader, Washakie of the Shoshone Nation, and Black Hawk from the Sauk Nation. Mary Ann Russell, the wise and loving woman that wrote the poem, "Why, My Brother?" and many more like it, was non-indigenous, but she had an indigenous soul. At this point, it may be good to mention a book by Vine Deloria Jr. called God is Red. Vine does an excellent job of pointing out the contrast between the non-indigenous religion and the indigenous spirituality. So I want to leave you with this. We've talked a lot about traditional indigenous ways of being in RDR, respect, discipline, and responsibility. But what it all boils down to is that everybody has to make a change to get outside yourself. Traditional indigenous ways of being is about thinking about others, the community, and all things, creating that relationship to all things, not just humans, but animals, plants, our environment, and everything, all of Earth Mother's creation. That's what it's all about. Right now, some of you, yes, have awakened to that, and we see a movement, but it's not enough. We need everybody, all of you that are awakened, start telling it. Start spreading that news of traditional indigenous ways of being to others around you. Start pointing it out. The children, your youth, our youth are the future. Make it happen. They will listen to you. So listen to the signs. See the signs Earth Mother has given us. We've got hurricanes, we've got volcanoes, we've got earthquakes, we've got fires, we've got the polar ice caps melting, the waters are rising. She's given us all the signs, and it's getting worse and worse. The signs are there. She's telling us. She's warning us. She's trying to help us. That's why she had all of us in this film bring you this message. She can't say it any clearer, and now either can we.
Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the gentle night to you. Moon and stars pour their healing light on you. Deep peace to you. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. And deep peace of the gentle night to you. Moon and stars pour their healing light on you. Deep peace of the gentle night to you. Moon and stars pour their healing light on